Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming out this morning. I know we're all here and anxious to hear our guest speaker in just a moment, but first I would like to say that I think the award for diligence and detail orientation in putting on a great ACAD symposium award goes to Kevin Conlon. Kevin, I think you've done a great job. Well, we're all in for a real treat this morning, and I'm thrilled to be able to make that introduction. I can tell you this, that when you leave this theater today, you are going to be looking at the world a little differently than you were looking at it when you came in here this morning, and that is going to be a positive thing, because you're going to hear things differently than you've heard them before. I'm going to introduce to you a great friend, a longtime friend of mine, and one of my most respected colleagues. Ravi, Sawhney, and I graduated college together, and just a few years later, he founded RKS. And as you probably know, RKS has grown to become one of the industry's leading design and innovation consultancies. Ravi founded the company based on one simple principle, that design has the ability to move people emotionally. Ravi coined the phrase, "It's not how you feel about design, but rather how the design makes you feel about yourself." In the early days, to give you a sense of how he harnessed emotion to sell a product, Ravi personally designed the viral toy hit Teddy Ruxpin. Y'all remember Teddy Ruxpin? Who had a Teddy Ruxpin? What happened with Teddy Ruxpin when it hit the market is that it became the fastest selling toy in history. And that's the power of emotion in design. What Ravi has done with that philosophy since then is what has catapulted his stature in the market. And it is profound. Ravi created a strategic research methodology called psychoaesthetics. Psychoaesthetics is a repeatable process that enables companies or organizations of any kind and any size to infuse their products or services with the emotional triggers that most appeal to their markets. And it works over and over again. And the product doesn't need to be a bear or a toy or even a product. Today, Ravi's team, based in Southern California, spends more time around the world than they spend in Southern California. What they're doing is helping large organizations that are household names that we've all heard of create and launch first-in-category products and services. And the president, not this president, the president, goes and travels to see Ravi. So if you check out Ravi's Twitter feed and the RKS blog post, you'll see exactly what I mean. To share this philosophy with the world, Ravi authored the book Predictable Magic, How to Unleash the Power of Design Strategy to Transform Your Business. Some of you, many of you, most of you by now have a copy. Some of you I know have read it already. It has been translated into multiple languages and is being used in cultures around the world to fuel growth. So it is with great pleasure that I now introduce you to Ravi Sawhney.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Kevin. I think I have to press a button to get my screen here. Oh, here we go. Well, thank you for having me here today. I'm very excited to present our work in methodologies to everyone. I titled this, I feel appropriately, Imagine, Empower, Design, Think. Design thinking is the buzz these days, but that's very limiting for all of us. I'd like to start with just a few words of wisdom that'll tie into the presentation, and you'll see come through again and again. As Maya Angelou said, I've learned people will forget what you've said, people forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I think you'll see this come through. In 1985, what I said was that it's not how you feel about the design of the experience, it's how it makes you feel about yourself. And what you see up there are just some of the images of different programs we've done. And if you pay attention to the person top center, I'll talk about him a little bit later. So I feel that as anyone who gets up and presents a methodology, that you owe it to the audience to first really show what you've done with it. So I'd like to share some examples before I actually get deep into the methodology. So we've applied this methodology to the global giant Xylus, who is a Swiss-based company, and we have developed a multitude of kitchen products. Some of you may have these in your kitchen or may have seen them. In each case, there is a patented innovation. In each case, the product has had many successful years, some of them as many as 7 years and running. And there's been no need to actually redesign or obsolete these products. And the emotion and the content that we focused on, in many cases, is the sharing experience of what cooking really means. What does it really mean to cook for yourself, your family, your friends, and how do you mentor your children into cooking? So to create richer experiences through design. Some 8 years ago, a couple of entrepreneurs came to us, and they said they were disappointed with what was happening with the garbage patch, the Pacific Garbage Patch, and to see so many water bottles being disposed of, and that they wanted to transform this business into something that was more relevant to everyone's lives. So we took the approach to use design and emotion to evolve the market and evolve your connection with water to a higher level. What's happened was that the clients actually came to us at the point after we had developed it and they tooled it, and we had dinner with them, and we said, what's the plan to go to market? They said, we're going to put this on the website and hope it sells. We said, that's not good enough. So we took it upon ourselves to write the story about what is the meaning of water, why is water so important in our lives, why is it so precious, how do we treat water, and what's happening, in fact, with disposable water bottles. We also talked about BPA, which this was the trigger to create BPA-free plastics, was the insistence of ourselves and the core team that they would not go to market until there was a BPA-free plastic. Eastman took it upon themselves then to develop and advance the development of a BPA-free plastic. So as it turns out, we were correct in what we were doing. The story went viral. If you look up Core Water is all over the media, has never had a press company. Nope, they've done zero PR. And Gwyneth Paltrow fell in love with the bottles. She got the bottles to the writers of Iron Man 2, who fell in love with the bottles. They wrote the bottles into the Iron Man 2 movie in multiple places and made it a big part of the movie. And it resulted in a multi-million-dollar product placement that came completely for free and completely without the knowledge of anyone at Core or RKS. We only found out once the movie launched. That in turn took a big turn for Core because they had such viral awareness already, and that propelled them into now they're in 100 companies. And what I'm going to show you now is something we did 10 years ago. Part of this methodology, and the beauty of this methodology I'm going to show you, is it allows us to go places that we've never been. So I'm going to bounce around from product category to product category, and what you're going to get a sense of is the diversity and the breadth of work that's driven through this methodology. So 10 years ago, we created this concept for LG. So that was done in 2004, showing them that what would be the future of telephones and what would be the future of gaming and telephones. Of course, they're very regretful that they didn't produce this, Every time I meet with them and they ask to see our work again, I always have the slide in there, and they always look at each other and say, I just can't believe we didn't produce this, because 10 years ago, this was forecasting a design language and activity that was way ahead of its time, but very relevant. You know, the purity of the form and the resolution. Now jumping to medical products, 20 years ago, when we started using psychosthetics and started developing this, we were brought in by a company called MiniMed. MiniMed was making this product here, you see the 506. That's a diabetic infusion pump. It's one of the first products on the market. And they were challenged, and I would say at the point where they thought, as a last resort, perhaps design could help them. They had fallen in sales from $60 million in sales to $40 million in sales, and were watching their market disappear. They couldn't understand it, that a product that gives such great benefit to a diabetic could be refused by a diabetic. The benefit of an insulin pump is tremendous. It resolves many of the issues that you have with diabetes, because you're duplicating or synthetically duplicating what happens with your pancreas. What we did was that we also wore the pumps for 4 days as a team, and we used insulin. We used saline, instead of insulin. I wouldn't be here if I used insulin. But we used saline instead of insulin, and what we found was that this very medical product carried with it a stigma. And you see the illustration in the lower right that showed that people were looking at us, people were questioning us, that what's wrong with you? And you felt ill the minute you took this out. But if you're in a restaurant and you just had a piece of cake, you needed to give yourself a bolus of insulin. So what we did was that we reversed the design to not stand out, but to look like a pager. So this became and this is before Apple had done translucence, but after Swatch had done it. And we created this new design language based on all of their 510K requirements. So we didn't have to get new FDA approvals, and we just repositioned the product. The adoption rates soared. They very interesting. It was interesting that management still insisted that with this new design that they should use their old medical colors. And after going back to them 10 times to argue the point, they finally gave up and said, okay, we'll do it in the translucent blue, just because we're so tired of hearing the designers argue with us about this. Turns out 90% of sales were in that color, and it carried on for years. And after they launched with the new product, sales went from $40 million to $270 million in sales 3 years later. And then they were acquired by Medtronic for $3.6 billion on $270 million in sales. Right there, that shows you the power of design, but it's driven through the benefit and understanding of who the audience is. Other dynamic work that we've done for, last night there was a party for the YPO organization, and there was a musician there using this new amplifier. So we've done work in the music industry, and this is the first cloud-based high-tech amplifier that has ever been brought to the market. And this allows you to stream guitar setups and guitar playing. For example, if you want to play All Along the Watchtower with Jimi Hendrix, you could find it and upload it, and you would have the exact guitar settings that Jimi Hendrix had in the studio when he recorded it. Then you could play along with Hendrix, and as you become the lead guitar player, you could fade him out and fade yourself up. So it gives a new experience to guitar players that they've never had before, right? This is incredibly fast, dynamic. The sound is tremendous, And again, the market success was that Guitar Center placed the largest single order ever for amplifiers with this product, and it sold out in as fast as 2 weeks. Other products that we've been working on and that are launching, this is WikiPad's new product that we've developed, which basically snaps onto the ends of an iPad and turns it into a high-speed gaming device. So technology has advanced on our tablets to the point of where they're so fast that it's almost becoming irrelevant. However, when you go to gaming, interaction is the limitation on the tablets. So you have this incredible screen close to your face that's got phenomenal resolution, but you can't react fast enough to the point of where the interface becomes invisible and you live in the game. So WikiPad we created this and we're able to obtain utility patents within a year, and this will go to market this year. Other interesting programs that we've done are things like Musini, which is a toy that sits on the floor and picks up sound vibrations through a microseismograph, very, very appropriate to come out of Southern California. And when you tap your foot, it will respond with a light and a tone. And if you tap twice, it may do it twice. And if you tap 3 times, it might all of a sudden compose something for you to respond to. So it starts a level of interaction between the child and the toy that's completely dynamic, that's completely random, but that's completely engaging for them. So they're active, they're dancing, they're playing, and they're anticipating what's going to happen next. Again, I'm talking about diversity. This is one example of the very successful medical programs that we've done for Hamilton, in which we create new ventilators that are targeted and very successful in the first attender market. So first attenders have all kinds of complications. They're wearing gloves. They can't use a touch screen because they need the tactile feedback. There can be zero error. All the hoses need to be protected, and they go into very complicated dynamic environments. This is the first ventilator that will actually go with a victim all the way from the ambulance or the helicopter all the way through surgery without ever having to disconnect them. And the methodology that I'll show you is critical. In fact, when we started with Hamilton, they used our methodology in our design to bring new products to market. Today, we use the methodology to define the market, define what the new product will be, and then it goes back to engineering to develop that product. Some of the very exciting work we've done includes global work for companies like Unilever, where they asked us to innovate for 1 billion people, that they wanted 1 billion people to adopt the new technology that we were to create after 5 years. In this case, we found that actually collecting water globally is a huge issue. And what we developed through a process of psychoaesthetics, through our work sessions and our creative emergence sessions, we developed, in this case, a single bucket wash. And through mining their technology and working with the scientists, we found that they had a patent on a flocculation pill. So you can put a single bucket of water in here with the detergent, wash your clothes, add the flocculation pill. That'll coagulate the dirt and the detergent into a gel. Pour the water out, wring the clothes out, hang them up to dry, and then put that gel into your garden because it helps your garden. That's how dynamic the work has become. In the case of Sharp, we developed all of the new user interface using the same methodologies, and we actually are developing and will launch a whole series of new television designs in a very competitive landscape. So we apply the same methodology to UX that we do to business services, that we do to product design. Here's another program we did with Unilever, in which we innovated through understanding the audience, that when we were interviewing and seeing women wearing burqas, in hot environments, not getting any vitamins from the sun, that we realized that there are things that detergent and washing can do. That washing doesn't have to be subtractive, that actually it could be additive. And you could put back something that's antibacterial, you could put something that gives you additional vitamins that you're missing, that you could actually help people through the laundry. And what we did was take it as far as to develop the complete brand, the complete packaging, and the complete pitch to Unilever as far as why they should do that. Again, then the diversity of the methodologies that we used it, in this case, to develop the new color strategies for LG's washers and dryers. So you can imagine that a client who comes to you and asks you to do their new colors, and you say, we have to do comprehensive ethnography and research and strategy to really understand where the market is and why they'll be attracted to one color over another. In fact, that's what successfully happens. We also have used the methodology to incubate our own companies. So we're partners in probably a dozen of our clients. In this case, we actually created a new guitar line called RKS Guitars. And in the process of doing that, we created the first generation of sustainable guitars. So it uses cellulose plastic, it uses farm-raised woods, it uses aluminum ribs, and the challenge to us was that we didn't want to create a guitar that sounded great that used tone woods from the rainforest. We wanted to preserve the rainforest. In fact, they were demolishing and removing large areas of rainforest to find tone woods that they're so valuable. So we went completely around that and innovated a way to get a tone, a balance, and features in a guitar that were advanced and meaningful, and that were good for the world and good for the environment. So what you see is that we actually brought in the gentleman in the upper right. That's Dave Mason. He became my partner in the guitar business. And the awareness of the guitar grew very fast. So you see the Rolling Stones contacted us. They wanted guitars. The Eagles contacted us. They wanted guitars. Beck plays them. Daniel Ash from Bauhaus plays them. And the list went on and on as far as the immediate adoption of the top tier musicians who would normally reject these things because they see hundreds of guitars and new guitars every year. But we were able to cause that adoption and create benefit and make them better guitar players. Wasn't easy. It took 3 years of working with Dave, prototyping, testing on stage, and developing it to get it. And you develop tremendous respect for what an instrument is and why they change so little over the years once you do one. But the results are there. This is the last project that I'll show. And this recently launched, 18 months after the company started. This program has launched. This is called Fresh Row, and this is a food delivery box. Pretty simply said, this box is under 17 inches square. It'll hold a week's worth of food. It will hold it at 40 degrees for 40 hours in shipping. It's refurbishable, sanitizable. It ships round trip for $11. It will deliver fresh food to your doorstep for the same price you would pay at retail. And it will do it as fast as 40 hours from the field to your doorstep. It can take as long as 10 days for the food to get from the field to you. In the process, 40% of the food perishes. In the process, almost 50 million Americans alone are food insecure. So this, in fact, does two tremendous things. It almost doubles the food supply by eliminating all of the perishable factors, and by going that fast from the field to your door that you don't need to add preservatives or spray it with preservatives. So the health benefits are tremendous. Now, what's interesting is that this client was founded by a person out of finance who worked for Clavico, who is the company that delivers the fresh cut cantaloupe, for example, that we get in the market. So when we go in and we see fresh cantaloupe cut and ready for us to take, comes in every day, that is the company that does this. They're in the channel, and what they realized is that they could do something better for the world and build a tremendous business. So this is a backbone company. As I said, it launched. It launched 18 months after was created. They immediately have signed contracts that have taken up the first year's ability to produce. So they're sold out. They're oversubscribed immediately upon launch. And this is the type of company that came to us as designers and said, help us understand how can we solve this problem. So it's not just that we did the brand and that we did the box, but we worked with them to understand what is the value proposition. How much food do we need to get into this box to make economic sense for consumers, for the channel, and for Fresh Realm. And the dynamics of it drove the density of the food inside of each drawer to be so dense that when we put a cold source, and we use a frozen water cold source in it, that there was no air movement, there was no convection occurring because the density was so high that the food next to the cold source was cold and the food that was next to, far away from it, was getting warm. So what we did is that we innovated, and we were, under the pressure, which is sometimes when the best innovation occurs, that that actually I had the idea that let's use a cold plate, let's do a stamped aluminum plate in the bottom, and the cold will transmit and radiate across that cross plate, that aluminum plate, radiate up and down and give us even temperature. And sure enough, that's exactly what it did. And to this day, no one prior has ever made a cold box that you could actually ship. So when we order food, as we all know, you get about 3 pounds of garbage to throw out. I mean, it's not a good experience. It's not something you feel good about, eating food that you know that you're damaging the environment through. So this has resolved pretty much everything for the consumer. And the beauty of it is that they're great people, and they are providing this as a backbone to the retailers. So they're not going to put anyone out of business. They're saying, we're just going to help you do business in a more friendly, a more healthier, and a more ecological way, and that's a better experience for the consumer. So those are the examples of diversity and work that we do. So, coming here today, it has a tremendous amount of responsibility to speak to you all as an audience. You think about what is the next generation's potential, because you are truly designing the next generation. The influence of what happens through everyone in this room is beyond conception as far as what will happen in the world through your students. And my questions were that, how do we prepare them to change the world? And how do we prepare them to invent the future? And at the same time, how can they resolve the past? So much of what we do doesn't really stop and take inventory of what our responsibilities are. I believe in having seen the change, especially in the last 10 years, of how design has influenced the world, and how we went from design, when I graduated, from being something that was elite to now being something that's so powerful, and at the same time something that we have hundreds of millions, if not billions, of experts on design everywhere. That you can walk up to someone on the street in China and they can tell you about their design and why they like it and why they dislike it and what the next generation should be. That for sure wasn't happening 40 years ago when I graduated. Almost 40 years ago. So part of what we do is that we speak to the audience, and we speak to the audience. So ethnography is a big part of what we do. In just the last few years, we've conducted 2,200 extensive interviews. So when Tom talks about our team is out of the office more than they're actually in the office, that's very true. And part of that is understanding, how do we empathize with people other than ourselves? How do we design for this person, right? How do we come to the realization that, and understanding that in the lower left, what looks like a wheelbarrow is not a wheelbarrow? That, in fact, is an ambulance. That is the ambulance that they carry AIDS patients to at a clinic out in Zambia. I mean, that's the tremendous influence of design. Make no mistake, I love designing pretty watches. I could do that and enjoy that. But when you travel the world and you see things like this, you realize that design is going to change the world, right? It may still be some form of a wheelbarrow, but there definitely could be a better job that we do about that. In the upper right, what you see is the work we did with HydroPack. So HydroPack is a project that came to us through Eastman Plastics. That is a cellulose bag filled with electrolytes, sugar, flavoring, and vitamins. When dropped into water, it self-inflates, gives about 500 milliliters and a couple hundred calories. You can drop that into any type of polluted water in a disaster and bring fresh water. One helicopter load of HydroPacks is equivalent to 15 helicopter loads of water, which you can't drop from the sky. And working with the people from Africa, including the head doctor, chief surgeon for the Air Force, he has seen people, if you can imagine, drinking water from polluted ponds with bodies floating in them. Because after 3 days, you become so desperate for water that you will die if you don't get it, so you might as well take your chances. So we worked with them on, solving those types of problems. So again, back to our students. I would like to see us bring and have them bring forward brilliance, relevance, and change. Now getting to psychoaesthetics. These are new eyes. These are eyes that they can see through. One of the things that's different about psychoaesthetics is that we found that it's a process, and the mapping is used in every stage. It's used in the discovery stage, it's used in the synthesis and creation phase, it's used in the realization phase. It transforms teams and people. So not only is it a design tool, it's a common language between designers and non-designers. And that's the beauty of being visual. So we have two key tools that we've been working with beyond all of what's called design thinking, which is great. I think for many of us, we've been working like that from our early days. But 20 years ago, we started working with this methodology. One is psychoaesthetics mapping, and the other is the hero's narrative. The hero's narrative came to us through Joseph Campbell. So Campbell, was a scholar, was a world traveler, an author, a lecturer, and we really bonded with his understanding and his hero's journey of what really has happened in the world. That who are these heroes? And, quotes like this: I don't think people are looking for the meaning of life as much as they're looking for the experience of being alive. That's a designer talking, right? And when you talk about the hero's journey, I applaud everyone in the room. There are no greater heroes than those who teach. Those involved in education, those who teach, those who share knowledge, change the world, and I hope someday will be once again the heroes that are acclaimed, because when I grew up, anyone who was in teaching, anyone who taught you, anyone who was associated with your school, those were the people you looked up to, those were the heroes, and I applaud everyone in this room, because what you're doing is that you are the ones who are changing the world. What we did, and what I saw 20 years ago, is that, wait a minute, as a designer, we are all responsible for this journey, for everyone that we engage with. Everyone who engages with something that we've designed, whether it's product, service, or business, we want to use design as the tool. So we have to master design so that it becomes a tool so we can attract and then take them through an engagement in parallel to the hero's journey, right? We want to engage them through the design. Touch points, affirmations, micro-affirmations. How do we test? And at some point, we will adopt a product or service. And when we do, and we have a moment of truth where we're affirmed that our decision was right and it was all about us, that the process I went through made me correct, and someone else acknowledges that, whether it's your child, whether it's your friend, whether it's your coworkers, someone else acknowledges that, that turns you into a heroic evangelist. You are then the hero because you have then conquered the landscape of options and overcome that and returned with the trophy. And that creates viral demand. People's body languages change. They become storytellers. People who are storytellers become incredibly empowered storytellers, and we've all seen that on the internet. This also plays very well to understanding what happens in today's dynamics of the internet, that bad news can be much more viral than good news. So you have to look at this type of approach, and you have to look at every student and everyone else as what is their journey. The next person we started working with was Maslow. And Maslow made a design statement too. What is necessary to change a person is change his awareness of himself. But what we found with Maslow's mapping was we needed to get something more than one-dimensional. So we created psychostatic mapping. This is the repeatable, scalable, universal process. You can do it at a superficial level, but the deeper you go, the more profound you'll be and the more accurate you'll be. What you see is that we started mapping interactivity and gave self-actualization. This is something that evolved over time, and it really takes designers to understand what we mean by interactivity. It's not features and price. It's always the same crosshairs for us. It's always self-actualization and interactivity. And once you have a repeatable framework, you start to leverage your experience. Your knowledge and know-how becomes repeatable. You start to align the different maps that you've done, the different analysis you've done. We see our 4 quadrants, a basic, versatile, artistic, and enriched quadrant. The basic quadrant is signified by a paperclip, right? Low interactivity, low self-actualization. It works, it's reliable, it's well-designed, it's well-engineered. You know, we all play with them, we move things around and they stop working. I mean, it's a pretty well-perfected product. But you don't go home thinking about your experience with your paperclip, right? It doesn't do anything for you as far as self-actualization. What you see in the basic quadrant is a lot of household goods, right? Buckets, washing things, you know, those types of products. Next quadrant is the versatile quadrant, signified by high interactivity and low self-actualization, the skip loader. Eyes, ears, hands, feet, you're completely involved, and you still don't go home thinking about your skip loader when you go home. You see technology in the versatile quadrant typically. The Mona Lisa is high self-actualization but low interactivity, right? But there's a process, and it's memorable. I still remember the first time I saw it 30 years ago, right? You got to get to Paris to get in line to get at the Louvre, to get a ticket, to get in line at the Louvre, to get through the Louvre, to get in line to see it behind rope, 15 feet away, and it's 8 by 10 behind glass. And, you know, there's something in the back of your head says, I wonder if that's the real Mona Lisa, but you don't care anyway. You buy it, you just buy in, right? And it is self-actualizing. And then an example, and I'm going to qualify this, is that for some people, the Ferrari, the car, would be the extreme. All right, you smell it, you hear it, you feel it, and the venture capitalist or investment banker or entrepreneur who falls in love with Ferraris. That's not me, but they fall in love with a Ferrari. That would be high interactivity and high self-actualization for that audience. And it's very audience specific. So we could all agree that in this case, understanding psychoaesthetics, that the phone that we get for free is towards the paperclip. iPhone 6 is towards the Ferrari, right? In comparison to one another, that's where I think we would put them. But what if you're this person, right? Carrying hay on a bicycle, you know, in an emerging economy. And we were shocked to understand that from our Western perspective, to even learn about how large Africa is. I mean, I really was shocked to have even any understanding that I thought Africa was the size of India, you know, based on the maps and our learnings. And it's shocking to see this. But again, how do we speak to this audience and how do we understand them? Well, for him, that basic phone goes all the way upper right. That's the beauty of this, is that if you understand the audience, you can take them to that upper right position. And he may live in a house that has no running water, no electricity, no heating, and a straw roof. But this is something that will change his life even more than that Ferrari is going to do for some guy who's hit it big, right? Or for any of us that buy something in that. And that's most of the world. I mean, we saw and have seen not people who live on $1 a day, families that live on $1 a day. So back to understanding more about psychoaesthetics, this is a real-life example. This is Life Technologies before we were engaged. Life Technologies is the leader in DNA sequencing. DNA sequencing is going to change everyone's lives in this room. It will allow you to live longer and healthier lives than you ever could have before. They're a company that grew through acquisition. They had bought over 30 companies, and everyone had their own industrial design language. And we were engaged by the CEO to create a global design language for a $5 billion company. This is an example of what they came to us with, and this is an example of what they have. Exactly the same technology. The question is, how do you get there? And why does it work? And why did it work? So we developed depersonification. Through those interviews, we're building personas. We look at psychographics, demographics. We define the market. We look at their experiences, and we interview and create these personas. They represent the market. Each one took about 6 interviews to create. And what we found was that unlike what we had stereotyped in our own minds about where the scientists would all be in the versatile quadrant, that they actually were living in a different space. They were thinking about the benefits of DNA sequencing to the world. They weren't thinking about their next great tool. But they were looking for something that was a signature of what they were doing for the world. In studying them and learning them and testing them through concepts, what we call sacrificial concepts, we can form a trajectory of who are they becoming. So this is critical because taking a map and assessing who someone is today only helps us if we can evolve it to where are they going. And everyone is on that hero's journey. We're all in transition. We all buy new clothing to become something new, not because we wore out our shirt or our dress. Maybe we wear out our socks, I don't know. But we're doing things because we're evolving. And that forms a trajectory, and that trajectory forms the opportunity zone. And this is where the opportunity zone is critical to everything you do, from concepting to working with others and to sharing this as a common language. That opportunity zone becomes what we work by, And in this case, as in all cases now, what we found is that psychostatic maps allowed us to do an aggregate understanding and assessment of the brands. Life Technologies is the one in the right. Illumina is their competitor. Their branding was right in the opportunity zone. So what did we do? We rebranded them by doing a simple badging on their products to get back into the zone. So DNA floats, we took a clear piece of plastic, we silkscreen Life on the back of it, we laminated it to another piece of clear plastic, we silkscreen Technologies on the back of that, and put white on the back of that. Very, very low cost. Life creates a drop shadow on the white that is a true drop shadow that intrigues you because you can't see how it's floating. So the scientists love it because they know DNA floats. So they connected with that. So we were able to put them in the zone. So next we look at, on the same map, we've looked at the people and the trajectories, we're looked at the brands, and now we're looking at the actual product. So Illumina is in the artistic zone, right? Artistic zone is mostly fashion products. Our client is right where the brand was. They're in the versatile quadrant. The Illumina product is beautiful. Truly is a beautiful design. This is $500,000 of state-of-the-art technology. You can't look at that and believe that that is the most high-speed, most reliable, most versatile, and most state-of-the-art technology available. It's simply beautiful. On the other hand, our technology looks like it predated DNA sequencing by about 20 years. It looks cumbersome, right? It is the same exact technology that is state-of-the-art that transformed into this. And that's one example in many examples of how this works, right? How can you use a map so universally? And I don't know, because I didn't as much design it as much as just fall onto it, and have been experimenting it with 20 years. And I keep thinking that I'm going to find the chink in the armor, and I'm going to find that there's a hole in the boat and that this thing's leaking water, but it hasn't yet. And it's repeatable and it's scalable, and it allowed us to, in 2 hours, present the global design language to the CEO, CMO, and CTO of a $5 billion company and gain complete alignment on the direction that we wanted to take a global design language. That's pretty powerful. The ability to use design and to map it and use it as a tool that communicates visually does a number of things. It's now a universal language, but it also allows us to recall all the nuances that we never otherwise would have. When you see the maps and you see the personas and the CMO challenges you on these scientists and says, well, I don't think that person thinks that way, you can immediately recall everything about the work you did. Because we're visual and we know it, but we may not be able to just profess it, especially under pressure. They also then align with the visual. They then become storytellers. They hold on to these maps. They hold on to all of this. They put them up in the rooms because this gives the essence of what they're doing. What's the net out effect? Our client went from being a $5 billion company to being acquired for over $15 billion after they launched the global design language. The product that triggered that most of all is the second from the right. That will do a DNA sequence in 2 hours for $1,000. You could go into your doctor's office and actually get a sequence that morning and have them analyzing it that afternoon. You could test animal products. You can test produce. When they had a problem with botulism in Germany, they used a prototype of this to backtrack and within days found the source of the botulism. That's how powerful DNA sequencing is. So that's psychoaesthetics. You can read more about psychoaesthetics in the Harvard case study And there's a Harvard exercise that you can use with your classes. The Harvard exercise is pretty comprehensive. It took us about 1.5 years to develop. Harvard found that the case study on RKS guitars and psychosthetics was so popular that they approached us to do an exercise to teach psychosthetics primarily to business students. But design students need to know this even more than business students do, and the adoption of business students has been great, which is beautiful because they understand how designers think now and how we work, and they can experiment, and they can collaborate, and they can be in on the creation process. And then, of course, there was a copy of my book, which goes through in greater detail. And finally, my final quote, someone again who, did a little design speak for us. We can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. Phenomenal things. So I hope to lead you to the conclusion that the tools I'm showing you and the way we've worked are effective, and that they provide possibilities for new and collaborative thinking, and that if you use them, you can empower your design students to do things that they couldn't have otherwise done. So I thank you for your time, and I'm finishing exactly on time, so I don't know how I did that, but I thank everyone.
Hello? Do you have some time for questions, Ravi?
Oh, sure.
If you want to ask Ravi a question, please use the microphone. Let's make sure we get this on.
Hi, Ravi. Great work. Great
Thank
work.
you.
And I can't wait to take it back to my students. I wanted to ask you when that, I really want to play guitar with Hendrix, but what really turns me on about your work is the kind of social design. And when did you have the realization that you wanted to work in that realm?
We have, I would have to say that it didn't really come to me probably until somewhere in the 90s. I was focused on, hardcore industrial design, just getting it right. And then as projects, what I learned, my early days were at Xerox before I started my own firm. I worked with 20 PhD psychologists. And that somehow got into my DNA and kind of emerged later on. And it started probably in the 90s. And today it's pretty strong. We had the great pleasure of working with C.K. Prahlad. So CK's daughter co-authored my book. And so we had incredible access to CK, who, those of you who don't know who CK was, he passed away, I think, 2.5 years ago. He was named 2 years running the #1 strategist in the world. So he was the head, he was one of the head professors at Michigan. But he was an incredible thinker. So he wrote The Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid, so it's a current term used in business, BOP. And what he taught us was that, there is benefit for business at the bottom of the pyramid, but we've gone beyond that, and we just love to do pure social work because it's work and it's effective. 2 weeks ago, we actually did 6 sessions with charities, full-day sessions. So we had 6 team members working with charities in Los Angeles. And then we had, I think the week before, we did a couple days in Chicago working with charities. So the social needs are going to put a lot of demand on design, and I think design is very up for responding to that. So it's something we love to do. We love to give back. So it's it's very valuable to us. So you think about if you could save a life. I respect and love Apple, and I would love to design a watch that we sold 100 million watches. I would trade that in any day to save one person's life, to make other people's lives better. That's really rich. So, thank you for the question.
Hello. Thank you for your talk. I'm wondering, in terms of what we can take back to our students, when you're working in teams, if you have anything that you look for in partners or any secrets or non-negotiables of team building or working in teams that you can share.
Well, it's interesting. When we started, we thought that we would have to compile our teams very closely and select them. In fact, the visual language of psychoaesthetics is so engaging that what we found is that actually we are able to build teams randomly. We bring in CEOs, we bring in people from the shipping floor, we bring in anyone, and we'll put them into a work session. They're usually teams of 5 people. So the quantity has to be right, so we might have multiple rooms. But and typically what we'll do is we'll spend the morning indoctrinating everyone, and then we'll send them off to actually do the creation process. So, I think that's just amazing and great that we don't have to be selective about the teams. Brilliant ideas, last night we were walking, a person said brilliant ideas come from anywhere, and in fact they come from everywhere. How do you map them and put them up to the map and assess them is a different thing. So the tool works really well to pull together teams. So I've seen also with weak designers who are weak on the skills and were struggling, that all of a sudden they can get on board because it's more intellectual for them, it's more visual for them, and all of a sudden they start creating higher levels of design than they ever had before. So I think it's a great transformative experience for students, and especially for the weaker students. I would having taught I taught part-time in total for 4 years. I would say the superstar student is probably the toughest one, because they think they got it. They can draw and they can render and they can make everything, the world look rosy and great. And they're the ones who will actually float upper left all the time. They'll go towards the Mona Lisa when they're the ones who have to be taught what's the meaning of design. It's all about meaning. Otherwise, design's very superficial if you're just focused on that part. Thank you. Great question also.
Thank you for your presentation. It's
Thank you.
really well done. I like that you speak to the ubiquity of high-impact design, but it begs the question of ethics, of ethnocentrism, of cultural relativism. And so I was wondering if you could maybe unpack your ethnographic methods in relation to ethics in design.
In relation to ethics, that's a great question, but I'm not sure I understand it. Maybe you can clarify about what you mean by ethics in design.
Well, we as educators, as you put it, we're kind of forging the next generation of designers. And with that increasing ubiquity, what those designers do is going to impact people all over the world more and more in their day-to-day life, which means that there can be some consequences to that. So what is we as educators can take away from your presentation of method in terms of addressing the ethical issue?
Well, I have a perspective, and that is that I've always believed that that you have to be able to facilitate the audience, no matter who they are and where they are in the world. You have to facilitate them to evolve as opposed to prescribe to them. So I've never been a believer that I was such a great designer that I could prescribe to the world that because I love this, you should love this also. I've actually been of the opposite, that I want to speak to them and for them. I want to be able to create and innovate from the first person. Now, they may not be able to do what I can do as well as I can do, but I can never empathize enough with that child who lives in a 7x7 mud room with 3 sisters but goes to school every day as to what their life is, and how they get up at 4 in the morning to do their chores and then leave at 6 in the morning to walk for 2 hours to get to school. I will never be able to, empathy is great, but you have to be able to develop the tools so that you do have the strong ethics, that you're not prescribing to them. And I hope that answers your question, that you want to facilitate them. You want to help them to take what they do and what they know to evolve. And that's the hero's journey. It's not our hero's journey. It's their hero's journey. But it may be true that we're also on a hero's journey through them. So I hope does that help?
It does, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I have a really nuts and bolts question, which is the relationship of the design ideas to the actual science that's required for these things to work, right? Because, I mean, they both are tactile and attractive and, you know, right, embraced. But they also, the Hydra Pack, you know, the science of the Hydra Pack, right? So what's the relationship between RKS? How much of the science is internal and working with the designers, and how much of that is, you know, I'm sure the DNA sequencing, it's almost all in the client. And to what extent is the science integral to the design evolution?
Well, if it's pure science, you're right that that's primarily on the client side. In the case of Hydra Pack, the science was developed by Hydra Pack and by Eastman, that they developed the cellulose fiber that could pull through osmosis and strip away all the bacteria and viruses in the process through osmosis. Their disconnect was that kids in Africa don't know what a drink pack is, right? They don't know that you take a straw and stick it into you know, a hole in a plastic bag and drink out of it. You know, that's so we have to work within that science. We have to be very respectful of the science, and we have to integrate the science, but we also integrate the science and the scientists into the creative process. And it's phenomenal when you do that. I mean, the ideas that percolate and their involvement and their contribution to the design process is as equal as our contributions to the science. In that way, I mean, saying that that's great, you have the science, but what you really will need to do is evolve the science in order to do this based on human needs, based on being human-centric. That's what otherwise it's a technology push. So it is a collaborative process. It always is collaborative. And I think when designers start talking in terms differently than aesthetics, different than renderings, different than design process, you get the respect of the scientists. And scientists are ready, scientists, businessmen, you know, the MBA community, everyone is ready to hear what the designer has to say. We just have to be very careful to talk about what we really do, right? Not what we learned, not our skills, but what do we really do, and what do we really know that they don't know? Well, what we know is how to read people. We may not even be anthropologists. We have PhD anthropologists on our team, but we all learn as designers how to read people. We know that when someone's going to reject something or someone's going to accept something. I know who in this room is accepting and adopting my ideas because I've been doing design and watching that. How difficult is it to do that? And the scientists love and respect that if you articulate it in a way that, again, is not prescriptive, but is more facilitative of having them go through their hero's journey again and helping them in their process. And once you do that, they're bonded. They're bonded with you because you are making them something more than they ever were before. Key anthropologists, we worked with Bob Deutsch, who was a key anthropologist for DDB. He taught me that the three questions every person asks is something like me, does something like me, can it make me more? That's when you're born, how you recognize your mother to breastfeed. That is the question that you ask every day of your life in everything you do. That's the question you're asking right now about Ravi Sawhney standing up here and, you know, showing his wares and showing his process. Is it like me? Does it like me? Can it make me more? And if you think about that in terms of then the hero's journey and put it all together, it's like you see that scientist on his hero's journey and you see what they can do and their science, and you light up also with excitement. You know, so it's great questions. Thank you.